Yeah, welcome everybody. Please introduce yourselves in the chat. Yeah, thanks for joining us on Friday afternoon for our 13th meeting of the task force, which started almost 5 years ago. And yeah, we it's quite an important meeting actually because we're doing a bit of a pivot. So yeah, the task force as it was originally designed has almost completed its mandate. And now we're pivoting at the midpoint of the decade and really focusing on what we need to do in terms of monitoring but in particular, make target two a success. So target two of the CBD, which is to restore or have 30% of degraded ecosystems under restoration by 2030. So we'll share information on this pivot. We'll share the Target 2 roadmap, which is what we are calling our new approach because it's also written very nicely into a CBD decision for us to work on this. So thanks to the CBD and CBD parties for putting that in an official decision. It really helps us operate. And just to provide some clarity on the pivot, the new structure, the roadmap, and in particular, we really want opportunities for everybody to contribute if you have the time and are willing to. Next slide, please, Temi. So here, there we go. This is the agenda. Very brief welcome in from myself. I sit in the forestry division, but I support from the FAO side the task force for monitoring, but really, in fact, Yelena does most of the work. And Yelena will moderate this meeting, so I'll just provide a few words at the start. Then we'll give an overview of what we're calling the Target 2 roadmap, and we're using it as a sort of a pathway toward 2030 for the task force. And under this roadmap, we have several working groups, which are not too dissimilar to working groups we had previously, but we're refreshing them, we're revitalizing them, and there's quite a few of them. So we'll actually present each and invite people to engage into them. And then we'll have time for a discussion at the end. Next slide, Temi. Great. Yeah. So as I said at the start, a few of us have been here for all 13 meetings. And, when we first kicked off almost 5 years ago, we launched the task force. The mandate was really to develop a monitoring framework for the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. We sort of accomplished that, and during that time, there's been an evolving global context. During that time, CBD started thinking about having a specific. Well, you already had a target on restoration in the previous. I can never say it. HE targets, but you were going to have a more ambitious one for the global biodiversity framework, and so through that time, the task force, we developed the firm. We had many meetings and publications in support to that. And we also supported quite a bit on Target 2. So leveraging everybody's expertise and helping design Target 2 in the early days, and then working on the metadata, the indicator, and how to respond to that. And now the pivot is partly because Target 2 has been adopted, and we really want to support CBD parties, stakeholders to do restoration and monitor it effectively. So you see here the original task force, and this is perhaps the transition that we are proposing at the midpoint of the UN decade. It also, thanks to financial support from the United Kingdom, it also comes with some funding to help us with this transition. So the previous task force, as you can see, we had these sub-task forces. We had an aquatic ecosystems group, and we had a Target 2 working group that worked a lot actually on Target 2 before it was adopted and after it was adopted. The new structure, which I think Jamal and Alicia will kind of talk us through, is really about coming together to support the achievement of Target 2 under the CBD, which the UN Decade has adopted as our restoration target. It's endorsed by CBD parties, and it's extremely ambitious. So there's a lot of work to do. And under that Target 2 roadmap, we have a number of working groups, which I think will be presented, and then we'll invite people to comment and engage. But basically, we would like to, transition, I think, from the original mandate of the task force for the UN decade to a task force that's really focused on Target 2 implementation. And next slide, please, Temi. And I think that's it from my side. But yeah, thanks to everybody for being with us. If you've been with us for 13 meetings and for your continued support, I will pass over to Jamal, the CBD. Jamal.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Julian, and really happy to be here in this pivotal moment of the monitoring task force. So my name is Jamal Naklicheva. I'm working at the Secretariat of the Convention on Biological Diversity. I'm working on ecosystem restoration and forest biodiversity in the science unit. And great was to hear about all the pathway towards this moment where we're in now. It was good to hear about the background and really see the big interest and many participants now in this call. So what I will talk you through quickly is what is this Target 2 roadmap, so why it is and what is expected to deliver. So first of all, the Target 2 roadmap, why we are making this pivot and what is this? So as maybe some of you, even in this call, were with us in 2023 in the November workshop, which was hosted by FAO. So that was the workshop where we brought together the CBD parties and very broad group of stakeholders, helping us to understand and better articulate the needs of the CBD parties to effectively design, implement, monitor, and report on ecosystem restoration, which is aligned in the framework of the Target 2 of the Global Biodiversity Framework. So, and that workshop really provided us with a very diverse pictures of needs, gaps, and opportunities, and already solutions that very rich experience that already existed in some parts of the world. So, and basically we brought that all together and put it in a timeline with the big milestones. And this is what we called a roadmap. So by that time, it was just a timeline with a big milestones and just really charting us the way towards helping the parties in that big deliveries in the lead to the 2030 agenda of the GBF. But now, as we have the resources, thanks to, of course, support of the government of the UK and also other donors, like, for example, the Korean Forest Service, we are able to mobilize now the group and to really see how we can better articulate through a better governance system of this target, how can we really better deliver and be more specific to what we will be delivering in terms of products, organizing ourselves better. So therefore, the Target 2 roadmap, what we would like this to do is, first of all, to support communication between the different restoration platforms, because there are many platforms and many of them have a really great experience. We would like to learn from other restoration platforms and so that we could have the best data. We also realized that now, as we are in the phase of helping the countries or the parties in monitoring on ecosystem restoration, we really have to be very specific. It requires a different areas of expertise, and we hope that this group, this network, or this platform will bring that needed areas of expertise. with that, we would like to advance our knowledge on the status of restoration. So we would like to know where we are restoring, to what extent. We would like to showcase the progress, and by this also to help the countries to make a better projects and programs and having the access to funds. We hope that we will develop a global restoration data set as that the first line of our expectation, that we will be connecting to different restoration platforms that work with the different stakeholders. So we will finally have a really comprehensive global overview, which will also allow us to understand where we are with the restoration ambition. And of course, tapping to this very rich task force monitoring members, we hope that we will increase the visibility and outreach on ecosystem restoration. So next slide, please. And since the Target 2 roadmap, this network, the group or partnership, will exist still within the task force on monitoring, so there will be, of course, inherent link to this task force. And I don't know, maybe Julian would like to explain more on this. But it will build on the membership of the task force. So we are really happy to continue working with all of you. The Target 2 roadmap will complement the work of the task force, but just doing a more specific and focused work which is needed to help the framework Target 2. So through the enhanced coordination. And hopefully by this we will reduce some reporting burden on the countries. The working groups that will be proposed under the Target 2 roadmap, they will revitalize the previous sub-task forces of this task force on the monitoring. And those working groups will work based on demand, and therefore they're set up to make the progress towards the expected outcomes of the roadmap. Expected outcomes of the roadmap. So what are those outcomes? And those we would like to show in the next slide. So what we would like to do with this new or revitalized group is really to make sure that we increase the capacity of the CBD parties in the monitoring of restoration and reporting on the restoration. We also would like to have all the needed guidance and tools on the monitoring of specific indicators available by ecosystems, available but also accessible for the parties. We also would like to have the data and the knowledge on ecosystem restoration and improved and enhanced, so that the knowledge and information is now trusted, and we really see the picture and the trends on ecosystem restoration, so that we know where and to what to prioritize. We also would like to see that the data shared and there is interoperability enhanced through the framework and ecosystem restoration monitoring, like the interoperability between the different platforms. And of course, we would like to highlight and to recognize the role of indigenous peoples and local communities by improving their capacity in ecosystem restoration monitoring. And we would like this to be documented and integrated, and therefore increasing their role and recognition in the ecosystem restoration. And of course, this all work will be one of the highlight and a very practical example of the synergies across the Rio Convention, since the terrestrial ecosystem restoration is one of the cross-cutting agenda of 3 Rio Conventions. And of course, we will have the broad engagement and enhanced visibility through the monitoring task force membership. So with that, I'm passing over to Alice to continue on the governance structure that we're proposing.
Thank you, Jamal. Hi, everyone. My name is Alice Caravani, and I work in the restoration monitoring team here at FAO. I will now, walk you through this diagram, which is showing, the proposed governance structure that we've been, thinking about and trying to develop. And as you can see, there is a leads group, which is now fully formed, which basically creates the core decision-making body of the roadmap, and which will set the objectives and the overall strategy. And then a coordinator, which would be myself, who will basically coordinate the overall initiative and the relationship between the working groups and the leads group. And then there are these working groups, as Jamal was saying, that really reflect the outcomes of the Target 2 roadmap, and they will replace those previous sub-task forces of the task force on monitoring, and we will have presentations from each of the working group leads. But just to mention them, there are 4. One is on indicators and monitoring guidance, and this will be divided into 3 sub-working groups on each ecosystem type. So one on freshwater, one on marine and coastal, and one on terrestrial. Then a working group working on the data and the firm, in particular on the interoperability and data sharing, and one on national and regional capacity development, and then one on indigenous peoples restoration monitoring. And then there is a membership, which is basically the group that today we are, is in today's meeting. So it coincides with the larger task force on monitoring membership. And this is really the occasion for us to really exchange on the progress achieved by each of the working groups, and to exchange knowledge and expertise. So this is the overall governance structure. Then we can, move to the leads group. Just to give you an idea in terms of the composition, the idea is to really have the leads group made of experts. So it's a technical group, and the organizations, as you can see, have all quite indicative role, but so for FAO and CBD will be convening and coordinating the Target 2 roadmap, with CBD obviously with an eye on ensuring alignment to the CBD processes. Then we have the SCR, the Society for Ecosystem Restoration, with a focus on providing technical support on ecosystem restoration, in particular on indicators development. Then C for ECRAF, providing technical support on the national and regional capacity building. And then UNEP, UNCCD, and UNFCCC, which will work to ensure harmonizations across the Rio Conventions and the MEAs on restoration monitoring and reporting. And then the Ramsar as well, which will both provide technical support on wetland ecosystem, but also on ensuring harmonization between the Rio Conventions. And then the next slide, please. In terms of the key functions of the leads group, so as I say, first of all, obviously setting the overall strategic vision of the Target 2 roadmap, but then also to really provide those technical inputs to the work plans of the working groups, and that can also then lead to potentially, co-writing publications or participating in meetings on a demand-driven approach, and then promoting synergies across the Rio Conventions, monitoring progress, and then any other management or oversight controls. And the meetings are not fixed yet, but we don't expect them to be more than on a quarterly basis, and they're really based on needs. And this is just a quick overview in terms of the structure of the working groups. Those, as we mentioned, are really designed to reflect the key thematic areas of the roadmap, and they will each be led by one organization. And the idea is for each working group to really work autonomously and to meet according to each of the needs, according to the needs and the priorities of each working group. And then each working group lead will decide who will be part of it and the structure of each working group. So when there will be the presentations of the various working group leads, you can then feel free to reach out to the various leads for more information. And then the expectation is to have an annual work plan for each working group that will then be shared with the leads group, and the leads group will then review it, and the working groups will keep the leads group up to date and on progress. And each working group is really expected to work at its own pace, and we will see that there are some that are more established than others, but yeah, they're all kind of different but interlinked. And this is just a timeline in terms of the next steps up to the formal launch, because this today is just an initial overview and presentation of the concept of this Target 2 roadmap, but then we have a plan to formally launch it at the Substa in Panama at the end of 24th of October. So now in July we're presenting, we're establishing the working groups through this call, and then we will in September we will have the working groups prepare these more detailed work plans. And then in October, there will be the preparations for this launch. And then in 1 year time, in September 2026, we expect to have a review point with the first in-person meeting that can be organized in parallel with the UN Decade global event, but that's still to be confirmed. Anyway, yeah, I'll now pass it back to Yelena.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alicia. And yes, thank you, colleagues, for the great introduction of the Target 2 roadmap. And I just want to bring to everyone's attention that this is something that we're shaping right now. So we have this meeting today to get your feedback, your participation, and to have to make sure that you have ownership also over this roadmap, this partnership, and to have you engaged in this process. So we're formulating these working groups, as Alicia mentioned. The various working groups are in various stages of formulation, and so you'll see some presentations on the working groups here, and then we have plenty of time for your discussion points, to hear from you what you would like to see, what's of interest. So really looking forward then to hearing from all of the task force members in the discussion that we'll have after these presentations. And if you have any questions, also feel free to write them in the chat or bring them up later in the discussion. So we'll start off presenting the working groups, hearing from Pablo and David on the Indigenous Peoples Restoration Monitoring Working Group. So please, I think Pablo will present. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Elena and colleagues. It is a pleasure for us to be here and to contribute to this partnership on Target 2 of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And this working group on Indigenous people restoration monitoring, trying to promote Indigenous people-led restoration actions aligned with Target 2, but also with Target 22, which is about Indigenous people knowledge and the connection with the different targets of the Kunming-Montreal, understanding that the overall sections of the framework recognize the roles of Indigenous peoples as custodians of biodiversity and also as game changers in biodiversity conservation and sustainable use. The next one, please. So the frame of this working group will be support different initiatives. For example, at the FAO Indigenous Peoples Unit, the Indigenous Peoples Biocentric Restoration Program, which is focused on the Indigenous Peoples cosmogony and food and knowledge systems to restore degraded ecosystems, and which is working now in 7 countries and also getting the request from 4 more countries. And as part of these programs to support Indigenous-led actions and support also direct access to finance and to funds for Indigenous peoples, is part also of the works of the UN Decade Task Force on Best Practices, because the idea is, as Yelena and Alicia already mentioned, to connect the processes between the Rio Conventions. We are speaking about the Kunming-Montreal GBF, but also the works of the UNFCCC and the works on the land degradation neutrality of the UNCCD and in the different critical biomes. The idea is also under the project of Aim for Forests, create a community of practices of indigenous peoples forest monitoring and the linkages between the different targets of the Kunming-Montreal. As I already mentioned, FAO is one of the custodians of Target 2, obviously on restoration, but also on Target 22 on land tenure and land use. So this restoration is based in the recognition of the collective rights of indigenous peoples, involving indigenous people as partners in this sustainable use and conservation of the biodiversity. The next one, please. The different target groups that we have are the indigenous peoples organizations, obviously also civil society, grassroots organizations. The work with the governments is fundamental, and with different NGOs, mostly in the environmental sector, with the academia, and global different networks and coalitions. And we would like to mention that we host at the FAO the Global Hub of Indigenous People Food Systems, which is a think tank of 70 organizations, try to put at the same level of respect the indigenous people's knowledge and the scientific knowledge. And we have institutions such as the University of Cambridge, University of Harvard, but also indigenous universities such as the Indigenous University of Quintana Roo in Mexico. The idea of this working group is also liaise with the works of the CBD and the subsidiary body on Article 8J and the new program of work adopted, and also connecting with the caucus, the indigenous caucus to the CBD, with the International Indigenous Forum on Biodiversity, that supported the adoption of this program of work of Article 8J, which is at the end recognize the role of indigenous peoples in the conservation of nature, but also as custodians and guardians of genetic resources to protect biodiversity, but also, according to the FAO mandate, genetic resources for food and agriculture. We are including also the Fire Management Hub, which is also hosted by the FAO and is to promote sustainable practices to ensure the management of fires and decrease the fire impact on dry lands and in the different critical biomes and ecosystems. Global Land Observatory and technical partners. We are thinking, for example, in Landmark, in the International Land Coalition, in WRI, but also different partners such as INVAR. With INVAR, we have been working on indigenous-led restoration actions based in bamboo in the Amazon basin, for example, or with CINDES, which we are working in the Andean region. The geographical scope regarding the Indigenous People Biocentric Restoration Global Program, we have already worked in Peru, Brazil, Bolivia, Costa Rica, Colombia, Ecuador, India, and we are starting the work in Nepal and also in Africa, in particular in DRC and in Kenya. And this connection between the three Rio Conventions also is ensuring the recognition of the critical biomes and the critical ecosystems. In the case of the UNCCD, they have 5 critical biomes, and we are trying to work on that. We're working in the dry corridor, we're working in the Andes, we're working in the Caatinga biome. So understanding also the relevance of peatlands, savannas, dry forests, tropical forests. And the idea is that this indigenous people restoration monitoring working group, obviously the focus is on monitoring, but this is a cross-cutting issue that will also recognize the work of the other working groups, supporting indigenous-led restoration actions and supporting also a direct access to funds for indigenous peoples. So I would like to give the floor to David Sabogal, who will continue with the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pablo. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is David Sabogal. I sit here with the forest monitoring team and also with the land tenure team at FAO. And together with Pablo from the Indigenous Peoples Units, we're proposing this current setup of the working group. Obviously, taking account these are still initial thinking and framing, but so the direction we're hoping to take this jointly also with an Indigenous organization counterpart, right? So the idea is that this working group be co-led with another organization, Indigenous Peoples Organization, and really building on existing initiatives, as Pablo mentioned, programs that are ongoing, initiatives that already work with communities on different topics related to restoration and monitoring, and that it responds to very clear demand in terms of technical capacity building, in terms of needs and requests from different organizations, and how this working group can support different processes, both technical and political ones, right? We also hope to address some of the complaints and concerns that have been raised by Indigenous peoples organizations, at least related to the UN Decade on restoration. And also, as Pablo mentioned, the idea is that we, also feed into the other working groups as well, right? In terms of the indicators, in terms of the country level capacity building, and in terms of the data and different tools for restoration, and hoping that we can be transversal in all the work that we do and relevant to all these different processes, right? Next, please, or next little section. And yes, the idea, the key objectives really are to strengthen the role and technical capacity of Indigenous peoples. That also very aligned with what Pablo mentioned in terms of this community practice, that it should be Indigenous peoples led, right? In this case, we focus on restoration and monitoring. That be sort of a collective process of also improving different tools, different platforms and data that exist for restoration mapping, for monitoring, also for reporting. Indigenous peoples be part of the process of improving those tools and also tailoring them to the different needs and realities of different types of users, right? We also really hope that this working group can generate new evidence and knowledge, both that brings in traditional knowledge, also scientific knowledge, to inform restoration efforts in the different regions and countries where we hope to also support. And that can also sort of respect, but also work towards recognizing other key aspects of land tenure and governance that are important for restoration, right? And we hope to also, through this cross-cutting sort of approach, also foster dialogue and technical collaboration across different stakeholders at public level and private sector. In terms of our activities, we're hoping to initiate more of a stock-taking exercise to see really all the different initiatives in Indigenous peoples-led restoration and monitoring initiatives globally. And this will also help feed into the firm, the platform, and try to identify, where these activities, initiatives are taking place. Please just move along with the presentation. And yes, as I mentioned, also trying to compile what tools, data sets exist. Obviously, with all the partners that are here, there are many tools and many data sets that have been compiled around this topic of restoration and monitoring. But there's many more, and the materials that are important that could be shared. We also hope to be testing and updating different tools, manuals, and platforms that can facilitate restoration and monitoring activities by Indigenous peoples, and hope to produce a number of key knowledge products that can also share good practices and lessons learned from restoration. We, as I mentioned, also want to make sure that Indigenous peoples are part of developing the restoration indicators, grounding this on traditional ecological knowledge, and supporting and promoting sort of knowledge exchanges. As Pablo mentioned, for example, with the biocentric restoration program, different countries and communities within particular ecosystems or regions, we really want to have the sort of knowledge exchanges across different groups and different restoration approaches and monitoring experiences, and also promote, and actually do technical capacity sessions with different organizations. These be led as well by Indigenous organizations, so they be the trainers, not just externally, and also that feed into active restoration initiatives and mapping processes. And lastly, also really engage at the national and international policy levels, right? How could our Indigenous peoples can use all these different knowledge and tools to also input into those spaces. In terms of next steps, as I mentioned, these are still initial discussions and ideas. There's still a process of engaging different organizations and communities, initiatives. But we hope to have some sort of exchange events here in Rome later in the year, towards the October at the World Food Forum. There's a special event that will be organized around restoration for Indigenous peoples as part of the Global Hub, Indigenous Peoples Food Systems. And so we hope to take that opportunity for an in-person meeting to really develop and agree further on all the activities planned on this working group. And we'd also like to initiate with this scoping or stock-taking exercise through a possible survey, which we'll be sharing hopefully soon, and also start developing some of these key knowledge products to really guide and how this working group will be set up and what the key entry points and activities will be in the coming years. So this is it from our end, I think, but happy to respond to any questions, suggestions in the next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David and Pablo. Yeah, it's a really important subject. And yeah, really looking forward to the work that will come out of that working group. Next, we have a set of working groups on developing indicators for monitoring effective ecosystem restoration. And so these are 3 sub-working groups focused on this topic of indicator and monitoring guidance. And first we'll hear from freshwater ecosystems, then marine and coastal, and then from myself on terrestrial ecosystems. So I'll pass it to Ashley Steele from FAO to start us off on freshwater inland waters ecosystems.
Thank you, Yelena. And I understand that I was given the opportunity to make a 30-second overview of the ecosystem working groups, our collection. So I just wanted to give it a little bit of an ecological context to support the pivot and how we intend to work together. So a watershed is the fundamental organizational unit of ecology, and everything within a watershed is inexorably linked by the flow of water. So that includes the upland forests, the forests in the lowlands, even agricultural areas, and all of the inland water ecosystems. They're linked together, and what happens inside the watershed has a huge and tremendous influence on the coastal and marine ecosystems. So from an ecological and a target 2 perspective, each of these ecosystems is very special. It's unique in its needs for reporting, monitoring, indicators, but we're also linked and we need to stay coordinated. So as a very small example, we started our work in the Freshwater Inland Waters Working Group with a collaborative webinar on aquatic restoration, and we partnered with the beginnings of the Coastal and Marine Expert Working Group to deliver that. And I think there'll be more and more opportunities in the future for these kind of parallels and coordinated outputs. So that'll take the second slide. So we know we're here for the Global Biodiversity Framework, Target 2, which is to restore 30% of degraded ecosystems under effective restoration. And it says inland water. I'm going to say freshwater inland water as one word because I believe there's a huge amount of expertise that falls under both words, and also the word wetlands, as well as words like rivers and lakes. So as long as I at least use 2, it reminds us to bring all of that expertise. And we're interested in how, in the beginning, our working group started with how we can support a cohesive understanding of how the definition of area under restoration, the headline indicator. And we looked very closely at the outcomes sought under Target 2, enhanced biodiversity, ecosystem services and functions, integrity, and connectivity. Next slide. So just thinking about freshwater, sort of what makes us special, freshwater inland water ecosystems, we host a disproportionate amount of the biodiversity on Earth, and we provide the clean drinking water on which so many people depend. We provide direct food production, if you think about inland fish, and also indirect food production. Forests and then freshwater inland water ecosystems supply all of agriculture with their water quality regulation, water quantity regulation, climate regulation, fantastic recreational opportunities, and fundamentally important cultural values. But these freshwater ecosystems, freshwater inland water ecosystems are degraded. This is a map from SDG indicator. Oh, let's go back to the slide before just to show the map. Indicator 6.3.2, and this assesses the proportion of a country's water bodies. So that includes rivers, lakes, and aquifers, having a good ambient water quality. And they talk about conductivity, acidification, nitrogen, phosphorus, oxygen. And when you look at these 2024 data, these describe the degradation of water-related ecosystems, and they indicate that 50% of countries report degraded ecosystems. And if you look at the gray areas, it also notes the scarcity of information in many countries. So this is an opportunity to support and in coordination with SDG reporting. Now, next slide. So we think about freshwater restoration, freshwater inland waters restoration. It's important to just have a visual image because we have, I think, a standard image when we hear the word restoration, it often is a bit terrestrial. And so it can be this across this entire restorative continuum. This is a lovely diagram from a recent publication with FAO, the Secretariat of the CBD, and the Society for Ecological Restoration. So as well as in terrestrial or marine and coastal restoration actions can go all the way from reducing societal impacts to fully recovering native ecosystems with many, many, many gradients in between. And I just put up this top picture so you can see what freshwater restoration often looks like. It's not necessarily gentle. It can be a big crane and all this action in the middle of the river. It's very expensive, complicated, engineering-oriented action. The point is to support and enhance those objectives all the way upstream or very far upstream and very far downstream, those objectives sought under target 2. And I provide the second picture just so you can see sometimes there's also very gentle things like planting. Next slide. So the first outcome of our technical working group, our expert working group, we've been together about 2 years, more or less, is production of these guidelines for restoring on inland water, freshwater ecosystems under target 2 of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And these guidelines really are a collaboration across 14 organizations. And if you flash to the next slide, you just get a quick idea. Can you flash just to the next one, Temi? Yeah, perfect. So you get an idea of just the breadth. We have a huge number of UN agencies, NGOs, research and global national research centers, as well as universities. And these experts all brought their knowledge and information. Next slide. To this report, and it has a few key messages. The QR code is here. You can get a lot more information, but it really highlights this interconnectedness of elements within a watershed, because this is fundamental to understanding how we can effectively report on freshwater inland waters restoration, to incentivize it and to support countries. We define the area under restoration for reporting on target 2 as the area over which any of those 4 desired outcomes are enhanced. And in doing this, we've also been working with FIRM. We heard that one of those outcomes desired for these working groups is to support data interoperability and support reporting. So we've been working with the FIRM platform for how can all these definitions be operationalized inside FIRM. And we've initiated ideas for monitoring and for indicators of freshwater inland water ecosystems. Next slide. So what are we doing now? We're developing a second report. We're looking at creating guidance on the full restoration cycle. So we think about integrated assessments for freshwater, inland water ecosystems, for restoration, for management, for biodiversity. And then when we have these integrated assessments, we can look at restoration prioritization across the entire watershed. And that can help us design monitoring and another kind of assessments is indicators, and that loops back to these integrated assessments for round 2. So really supporting the full restoration cycle. And we're working with countries and basins to collect, identify, and share case studies on reporting, prioritization, and monitoring. So what has been happening at the country level that other countries can learn from? So all the elements of restoration coordination. So we're looking, for example, at a case study on effective partnership building. And then we hope to be supporting capacity development, either sort of through on the ground support of learning, as well as e-learning activities such as our resilient rivers, watershed-based management of forest, freshwater, and inland fisheries. And I'm sure that we'll be working with the capacity development group on this next activities. That's it for freshwater inland waters. I'll turn it back over to Elena.
Thanks so much, Ashley. And I think we can just go directly to Marcel to hear from the Marine and Coastal Working Group.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. So I'm going to present the Marine and Coastal Working Group. I'm Marcel, working at the FAO Fisheries and Agriculture Division as an ecosystem restoration consultant. And this working group is really, it's in early stages. It's still about defining a common vision for reporting area under restoration in marine and coastal systems. So we're not as established as Ashley's working group, but we're just starting up. And that's why I'm really happy to already see so many faces of the people that were invited, because we actually were bringing together, as did Ashley, a lot of expertise from very diverse marine and coastal ecosystem and habitat types, very closely linked to the global ecosystem typology from the IUCN. So you see shellfish, you see kelp, you see salt marsh, coral, mangroves. So it's a very big spectrum, and that's going to be very enriching. And our main aim is to facilitate the exchange between these experts and to come up with and co-create voluntary guidelines for reporting under GBF Target 2. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to give you a taste of what we're envisioning at the moment to be doing is to really, this delineation of the area under restoration is not very clear at the moment, because we have an area of restoration intervention, which can be in the water, on the ground, and then we have the actual area under restoration to be reported. And Ashley showed that this area should be improving connectivity, ecosystem function, biodiversity, and enhance also ecosystem integrity. Not all of them together, but basically what this shows is this is not easy to define what the actually to be reported area under restoration is. And as marine and coastal ecosystems, similar to freshwater systems, are very connected, you can see this, for example, in the little example of kelp restoration, that our main question is how can we tease apart and define this area restoration from an area of intervention in marine and coastal systems, so that this full zone of positive ecological impact is actually captured, that it is as well as possible reproducible across most habitats, and also feasible to report actually in restoration tools that we have also at FAO. For example, Jelena is leading the development on the FIRM, for example, Framework for Ecosystem Restoration Monitoring. Next slide, please. Okay, second area of work is really to define and come up with guidelines for all types of restoration. So enabling consistent GBF Target 2 reporting across not only single habitat patches, but multi-habitat seascape, and also connecting land and sea when we talk about ridge to reef and source to sea systems, right? These criteria should be inclusive, broadly applicable, and non-prescriptive, because FAO is the guardian of the Target 2, but we're not prescribing anything. So we really want to collaboratively come up with guidelines with a common vision of how these areas to be reported can be defined, right? And next slide, please. So really interesting will be this the part when we come to connecting landscapes and seascapes, because oftentimes a restoration intervention that happens in freshwater and inland systems has positive benefits on marine and coastal ecosystems, right? And this is really difficult to report. So this will be a major challenge and a really inspiring thing to come up with. So how can marine and coastal systems reporting be harmonized and made compatible with terrestrial and freshwater restoration efforts, so that we can really present a coherent picture of the progress that is being made on Target 2. Just to give you a next slide, please, a taste of what's coming. we really want to come up with this common vision with our experts in 3 phases, tackling these core questions that I just proposed. But we're very open to our body of experts to enlarge that and to refine that via interviews, surveys, and facilitated recorded sessions. Then working on concrete examples that already try to report on exemplary cases, member-suggested cases, where we really have on-the-ground expertise of people who carried out restoration. And then co-define guidelines that can really help report on target 2 in marine and coastal systems, and also beyond, connecting to the landscapes. And the ultimate aim, as this is an output-centered working group, is ready to come up with some really good guidelines in supporting reporting on target 2. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Marcel. I thought it was a great presentation, and it looks like you do have some advanced thinking in terms of the marine and coastal. Looking forward to the discussion to hear what our colleagues have to say on that as well. So now I'll be presenting the Terrestrial Ecosystem Indicators and Monitoring Guidance Working Group. And first, I would like to look at the target 2, and of course we're familiar with this target, but there are some elements here where I think we still lack clear guidance on. First, in terms of the baseline, target 2 mentions to restore 30% of degraded ecosystems. But we could have, I think that there's a gap in terms of the guidance available, and also showing interlinkages between the Rio Conventions, here particularly between UNCCD and NCBD. Then it states for areas to be under effective restoration. So another element is defining what is effective restoration. How do we monitor and quantify effective restoration in terrestrial ecosystems? And we have these, what we call outcomes of the restoration. The 4 outcomes are to enhance biodiversity, ecosystem functions and services, ecological integrity, and connectivity. So then to have specific guidance and indicators on these 4 outcomes. And so the objective of this working group, and I think this working group, it's still in a formulation phase. So I have less fancy slides and really open to your feedback. And noting that this working group, it builds on the work of the past sub-task force, terrestrial ecosystem task force, and on previous efforts such as the GROW. So then further advancing and addressing these gaps and challenges in the current monitoring framework for effective terrestrial ecosystem restoration, and producing and co-creating guidance documents to support countries to meet their restoration targets. The scope, of course, is terrestrial ecosystems, all terrestrial ecosystems, and as I mentioned, to identify indicators, provide guidance, and highlight the linkages between restoration monitoring and other reporting mechanisms, particularly UNFCCC, UNCCD. Well, Ramsar is maybe a little less relevant here because we're focusing on terrestrial ecosystems in this group. And here are some kind of a brainstorming of key questions and gaps that could be addressed. And the first one is a common theme throughout the different ecosystem groups, and it's guidance on delineating the area under restoration and distinguishing between intervention areas, so where you have restoration activities, and the landscape or the area that's impacted by the restoration. We saw that also. Marcel showed a nice graphic to illustrate that also, that concept for marine ecosystems, and in the freshwater guidance, it also goes into this topic. So providing guidance on terrestrial ecosystems on this topic. And diving into what is effective restoration of terrestrial ecosystems, what are the indicators that can be used for monitoring restoration in terrestrial ecosystems, knowing that we need to then look into specific ecosystems and have appropriate indicators depending on restoration interventions, and identifying new technologies and methodologies for monitoring this effective restoration. Guidance on setting baselines and quantifying degradation for restoration monitoring, and synergies with, I think there's a little bit of repetition there in those second and third to last ones. So synergies between land degradation, restoration monitoring between, between UNCCD, and then as well climate change and biodiversity for restoration monitoring. So also UNFCCC, and thinking about restoration monitoring in the context of agriculture, agri-food systems. And I think we can go to the next slide. So some milestones, of course, we'll be launching the roadmap at SBSTA 27. Then this specific working group, we're planning on convening from Q4 of 2025. Another, and then I have the upcoming COPs from the 3 Rio conventions as milestones. At COP 30, we're thinking about how we can highlight the interlinkages between agri-food systems and restoration. And then we have plenty of time for the UNCCD and CVD COPs to show, to co-create and produce good guidance from this working group, and present them at those fora. I think we can go then to our next presenter, who will be Jewel, and presenting our working group on data interoperability and the framework for ecosystem restoration monitoring.
Thank you, Yelena. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Zhuo. I'm a ecosystem restoration consultant. When I joined the team in 2022, Climate Focus and SCR has just published a restoration project information sharing framework, and FAO was involved in the consultations. That's the beginning of the discussion, the ideas on interoperability. Then we drafted a target 2 indicator methodology, the 0 draft, and mentioned using interoperability framework to compile a global data set on restoration. In 2023, we held a workshop on data interoperability in Rome during the target 2 workshop. And in 2024, we implemented this idea and tested with, for example, UNEP WCMC's Nature Commitments platform, the Brazilian Restoration and Reforestation Observatory, SDR's Restoration Resource Center, and where we have ongoing work with interoperability project with Restore and IUCN Restoration Barometer. And we have started working with pilot countries to explore this idea further. So I'm glad that in this Target 2 partnership, we're having a working group dedicated on further advancing data interoperability and using the framework for ecosystem restoration monitoring, the firm as a core. So next slide, please. sorry, the same slide. So the objective of this target two, the working group 2 is to work with various data platforms and pilot countries to compile quality data for efficient reporting on area under restoration for target 2. And this experience from working with the pilot countries will contribute to building a global data set on nature restoration. And for this, we have planned the following main activities, and we are here collecting the ideas from you. So we will focus on developing and applying the interoperability framework for sharing restoration data across platforms, and we will develop quality control and quality assurance guidance for restoration database and platforms to apply. We would like to assess standards that can be applied and suggest to enable effective sharing of data, and we will also explore data share agreement policies and license to provide case studies for how to share data freely. Yeah, next slide. And here are some milestones. This year, the objective is to one objectives to establish the working group and define terms of references. And another milestone is to develop and document, and based on what we already have, to further develop the interoperability framework, including standards and recommendations. So we already have some cases, and we would like to document lessons learned and to build on it. This year and next year, we will publish the firm default data and collect feedback from pilot countries and from regional workshops. We will also produce a global analysis on restoration, release and make it visualizable in the new version of the firm geospatial platform. Then from 2026, we plan to document, to publish case studies on integrating national databases, and we will publish also the QA quality control, quality assurance guidelines, during the UN Decade meeting, we plan to convene another in-person side event, that's the main milestones that I have drafted, and we would like to engage platforms and databases to get your input on this, and make the working group 2 productive. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Joel. And now we have our last but not least, definitely not least, very important subject on national and regional capacity development. And we'll have Khalil from C4ECRAF present this working group. I'll be leading this working group. Over to you, Khalil.
Yeah, thanks, Yelena, for the introduction. Khalil Walji from C4ECRAF, and wonderful to see the task force convened and many familiar faces. Can everyone hear me? Yeah,
yes,
fantastic.
Yes.
Do a quick mic check, and allow me to be brief, so we have enough time for questions and exchange between the 72 colleagues who have joined, which is terrific. So while this working group in many ways this working group is new, all of you are already a part of it, and we've actually heard capacity development and exchange mentioned throughout all of the various task force presentations or the working group presentation. So really it builds directly on the ongoing work and expertise of the task force. And really the aim is not to duplicate, but to connect and amplify what's already underway. So I'm pleased to introduce working group number 2. or working group number 3, but my apologies, with the focus on national and regional capacity development. It'll be led by C4 ECRAF and FAO, but at the heart of this working group is really recognizing that many of the parties, many of the countries already have strong actors, already have strong institutions and knowledge systems, but what's often missing is that coordination and that targeted technical support and really opportunities to learn from one another, especially at the regional level. The working group is not starting from scratch. You'll see on the screen there that there's been a variety of global assessments that have already been conducted over the past few years. On the farthest left, you'll see in 2022, the UN Decade Team, the Best Practices Task Force, identified specific capacities across various levels of government and stakeholder groups, categorizing needs into individual, organizational, and systems-wide or enabling environment capacity needs. And they really highlighted the need to, one, foster technical networks and partnerships, improve policy coherence, and of course, further support to improve technical capacities, which includes, and very importantly, the monitoring phase. In 2024, the NBSAP Accelerator provided an overview of progress towards alignment of the biodiversity targets, and this was in the lead up to COP16, and they highlighted very similar requests from parties, or let's say challenges. Improving political commitment for restoration, enhancing stakeholder engagement, and again, improving technical capacity for monitoring and implementation. They cited the need for further facilitated peer-to-peer learning. And then finally, earlier this year, C4 ECRAF with FAO and various national partners finalized our capacity assessment. And I'll ask you to move to the next slide, please. Fantastic. And this was conducted through phase 1 of the Target 2 pilots, where we learned a tremendous amount from national dialogues in Burkina Faso, Kenya, Peru, Vietnam, and Brazil, where 5 key capacity needs and barriers were identified for Target 2 alignment. And they highlighted 5 interconnected barriers. And they echo what I've already spoken about: an improvement in policy coherence, the need for clearer guidance on restoration at the national and to support local level action, financial investment, and cross-sectoral collaboration. And given that restoration is inherently a cross-sectoral ambition, this is crucial. And then finally, technical capacity needs and monitoring, and the need for further knowledge exchange. One statistic that I thought would already be mentioned in the 8 previous presentations, but wasn't, is that the CBD also did their own capacity assessment from countries on their request on reporting to Target 2. And 100% requested capacity development for global methodologies, and 80% reported that they are going to struggle to collect data for Target 2 in time for the 7th national reporting cycle. So, I mean, the message is clear, right, from the parties that capacity development is essential. And I'll ask that you move to the 3rd slide. So the working group is really trying to respond to that very clear request that we're trying to catalyze the diverse ongoing work that exists within the task force, the various technical experts. But really the new aspect is channeling that into the regional and national level support structure. And that will be principally in collaboration with the CBD's regional technical scientific support centers, the TSSCs, who will really act as the regional hubs and help drive that localized capacity development efforts through sub-regional training, technical exchanges, and tailored support to national focal points. So you can see a quick glance at the composition of the working group. You can see the working group there on the top right-hand side. We intend this to be a small core team of 10 to 15 members who will actually steer the work of the working group. But we again fully intend to leverage the expertise that already exists here in the task force. And I know many of you are already leading regional or national level capacity development efforts. And so this group is really trying to connect that expertise to those TSSCs, and as a result, then down to the national focal points. Let's go to the next slide, please. So the objectives of this group is really to build in-country capacity for monitoring and reporting of Target 2, in line with the upcoming 7th national reporting cycle, but then also looking towards the 8th national reporting cycle as well. We want to sustain technical exchange through a growing community of practice, which will be an online space where we can share lessons and tools. There will be 3 regional workshops, which will be in person and targeted at CBD focal points in the regions. But once those workshops have finished, there are still going to be a number of technical capacity needs, and the regional centers will play the role as the node for those focal points. And so the working group will then connect technical experts to those CBD focal points. So we're trying to channel that collective knowledge from members, institutions, and national partners. Okay. As has been mentioned by many of the other working groups, We're going to be developing a rolling work plan to outline key trainings that are aligned with regional priorities. And we want to have really a coherent flow of guidance that builds on the work from all of the other working groups. So working groups 1 and 2, which are focused on indicators and guidance and data sharing, the needs are going to be vast. And the idea of the working group is really to try to synthesize the needs and requests and prepare technical guidance for that. We'll go to the final slide. Yeah, so as was mentioned, we're in the ideation phase before the formal launch in Q3. So first and foremost, we're inviting feedback from all of you. Let us know what you're doing. We know many of you are already working to enhance capacities, whether it's on monitoring or in other aspects. So let us know that that's going on. And if you can offer those support packages, that'd be terrific. We're inviting expressions of interest from all of those who would like to join. You can reach out either to myself, who will run the working group, or to Alice, who is the overall task force, or I keep saying task force, I'm not used to the transition yet, who is the coordinator of the roadmap and partnership. Yeah, so thanks very much. And yeah, super excited for the next session on questions and feedback. I'll pass it back to you, Elena.
Thanks so much, Khalil. And yeah, the working group on capacity development is really key then to make sure that the other working groups are focusing on the right topics, that the guidance documents are directly addressing the challenges, gaps, and needs that are identified by countries. So yeah, it's really important that the working groups are linked and speaking to each other, which we aim to do. Great, so that was a lot of content that we just presented. We have kind of 7 working groups here that have presented some ideas for future work through these working groups. As Khalil mentioned, most of these working groups are in ideation phase, and now we welcome you to join that, to voice your ideas. And yeah, so we have an open discussion now. I see someone in the chat has requested to share the contact information, email addresses of the working group leads. Absolutely, we can do that. I mean, perhaps we can already do that in the chat, but we'll be sending a follow-up email with the recording, with this presentation, with the full presentation from this session, and the contact. So if you are interested in joining a working group and actively participating in the co-creation of this of the guidance materials that will come out of the working group, please do contact that working group lead. So I'm looking for, perhaps we can stop sharing, and then sharing the screen. And yes, would anyone like to take the floor? I see Tom has his hand up from ICRI. Please, Tom.
Okay, thank you very much. And firstly, thanks everyone. It's been super interesting, and I do believe there's a real need for this transition, moving away from commitments and targets into actual implementation and solutions. So commend you all for the work that's been done. And ICRI remains supportive of this process, and we're happy to sort of work within and throughout the various task forces in support and delivery of the roadmap. There were just a couple of points that I wanted to question and sort of highlight. So just with respect to the restoration task force and the questions that were presented, there's one question that is continually cropping up sort of within ICRI, and one thing that we're trying to tackle is sort of how do we define when an ecosystem is restored? So what do we consider in that respect? And it's quite a complex question. So I think that would be something interesting to tackle, unless we're going to just end up with a very large proportion of every ecosystem under some form of restoration in continuity. So that's one thing that we're tackling with, and might be for consideration. for the task force? And are we looking at sort of restoring to historic baselines? Are we going from sort of looking for improvements from day zero restoration, or are we looking at functionality and service provision, etc.? So I'm happy to sort of work with the restoration task force on that and share sort of the lessons and knowledge that we're hearing from our members to sort of address those points, and from the restoration ad hoc committee as well. I've posted a lot in the chat, and I appreciate this is all mainly for coral reefs, but ICRI has an absolute a wealth of guidelines and information available on our website. So happy to sort of work with you to ensure that those guidelines are used where feasible, but also sort of build on the information in those guidelines to be applicable as possible to the roadmap and countries in the implementation of Target 2. And also ICRI happy to sort of work with this data task force as well, building on the work of the Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network in terms of our global and regional assessments of the world's coral reefs. We don't specifically look at restoration data at the moment, but it's a priority of ICRI to do so moving forward, but also looking at lessons learned around handling global data sets, data sharing agreements, sensitivities around data, etc. There's been some success stories and of course some lessons learned with respect to that. And of course, capacity building is a major priority of ICRI, so happy to collaborate on that one. And we recently developed guidelines for integrating coral reefs into NBSAPs, which have been well received, and we're also going to pivot towards integrating coral reefs into NDCs as well over the coming years. So of course, happy to share our progress and support on various activities around there. So there was a question in there right at the start and just some other points of reflections, but thanks everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tom, for that really rich feedback. I think your question is more of a question then that would be addressed by the working group. What are we, so I think I'm sure many probably here already have some opinion on that. What when do we know an ecosystem has been restored? But the language has also shifted since the in the restoration community to under restoration, to acknowledge that restoration is a process that then also requires then continuous monitoring to ensure that the restoration is continuing, not just because often then restored was thought of when the project ends. But yeah, of course, in terms of the ecosystem itself, I think that is an important question to address. And we absolutely welcome ICRI's engagements in the working groups and inclusion and promotion of the materials that you've already produced. Julian, please.
No, I think that's a great intervention, Tom. I mean, to be very pragmatic, and luckily Target 2 is area under restoration, so it can be quite inclusive, right, of whether something's just starting to be restored or something is perhaps already been restored. I think we try and capture everything. But a great question, and I sense many members are probably interested in participating in several working groups. And I think, and I imagine that these task force meetings will be a place where we basically hear updates from each of the working groups going forward, right? So in that way, people don't necessarily need to engage in 7 different task forces. Maybe if they want to direct their energy to a task force that most interests them, then they can get really engaged, and then they can hear updates from all the task forces in this format. I think that's a really nice way. And through this great task force with 400 members, we can really share the work that is coming out of these task forces across a really large group. So I just, because when I was listening to the task forces, I brilliant job, everybody. I was thinking, wow, I would love to get my hands on all of those, but we've all got a day job and we're all time constrained. But yeah, no, thanks to everybody for the great presentations. Back to you, Yelena.
Thanks so much, Julian, and please, Jamal, I see your hand
Yes, a
up.
very quick comment and reaction maybe to the question. Well, first of all, I was really impressed seeing now the working groups as being announced, because first I was like one of the people questioning, do we need so many working groups? But then, yes, now I'm convinced that they're already working, those groups, and they're already delivering. And just echoing from the question from Tom, like we're really eager to go to the technical details. Like we need to go to the technical details, and that's the mere purpose of having those working groups, to go and start tackling and unpacking and responding to the technical details. Like, for example, Tom, you put in the chat that there are plenty of guidelines on coral reefs restoration. So I believe they are mostly for the practice of the restoration, right? But then we still, whenever we go and start seeing how the countries could be effectively reporting on the target 2, we still see those unanswered questions in the guidelines. So with this whole richness of the guidelines, there is still pending questions that we kind of either way are not, they were not probably there as an objective, first of all, responding because they were prepared before the target 2 was adopted, or simply because they need really a more consolidated efforts to respond. And we're also mindful of the fact that we have different ecosystems, and the duration, the length of restoring to a certain state would be different in coral reefs or in forests or in mangroves, rivers, peatlands. So the area of the restoration, I mean, if it's just an intervention area or an impact area, we also had a lengthy discussion on that. So, but how to, considering all that different and very important, sometimes very big nuances and differences on the restoration, different ecosystem, but how still to find a standardized approach so that when the countries are reporting, they all understand that there is some, like a minimum standard level of understanding of application of those concepts in the different ecosystems. So, and what Joe has presented on the firm, the platform, of course, we will have the segregation by ecosystem, and that's also already a huge challenge, how to bring that to the parties and encouraging them to start reporting on the restoration by ecosystems, and maybe even by the level 3 of the global ecosystem topology. So, I mean, that's a lot of task ahead. And as you know, that the 7th reporting, the national reporting of CBD has started, and those 3 sub-regional training workshops that Khalil has mentioned, that will help us to get, first of all, to train the countries to use the firm, to use the ecosystem typology, to raise some of those questions on the reporting in the different ecosystems. But I also, now I really see the need on bringing those examples from different ecosystems, how the parties are going to report on them. And as our first workshop will be in Southeast Asia with the ASEAN Biodiversity Center, so we will have a big variety, like we'll have full ecosystems there. So that will be our first interface with how the countries will be reporting on that. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Jamal. Ashley, please.
I wanted to follow up because in our working group, we're very aware that there are lots and lots of guidelines out there and indicators, monitoring frameworks. In general, they are very well customized. And the challenge, maybe the inspiring hard thing we're trying to do, is to come up with something that is relevant globally and that can synthesize across all these different things. It would be more simple. So I think we feel that, having been in the working group for a while, we feel that tension between things exist, but at the global level, it still requires work. So I think that's a very fine line and a challenging one.
Yes, please, Jamal.
Yes, that's a very interesting discussion because in a way, what happens now in the CBD when you really go and carefully read all the decisions, you see the really the intention of the parties telling us and telling everyone, all the partners, that there are already many guidelines and tools existing, and what we should be focusing at now at that 5 years of the GBF left is making more efforts on disseminating them and making them accessible. So I don't know, I just want to throw this question to everyone. Should we in this, I would say the last phase to the second half of the GBF is focusing more on disseminating what is already available, and maybe instead of creating a completely new guidelines starting from scratch, and because then we know we developed the target 2 manual, the overarching manual. It took us almost 2 years to develop that because we went through a very rigorous process. So it takes time to create guidelines, but then if it's really required just some small customization and then really bringing it to the users.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jamal. I think that's I don't think the idea here is to reinvent the wheel, and that's why we're engaging with this group, and we would like to build on everyone's expertise. And I pass to Baron from UNCCD to comment.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. That what Jamal just said. I think that what people want to know is where I can find it, and so if anything that we can do to assemble and make it very easy to find, I think that's important. The other thing is, I think that when we push for more guidance, we end up sending the message that we don't know how to do it yet. And that's not true. What we want is for them to do it, to invest in it, to commit to it, etc. So even though we know we can do better and there are gaps, I definitely feel we need to do a better job of delivering what we've already demonstrated we know. So I fully support that.
Thank you. Thank you. And I think another key component is showing good examples of who has done it, because then I think that's also a catalyst for others to follow that example. Yeah, so bringing in the capacity development group and case studies is really key here as well. I think we are already 1 minute over, so I would like to thank everyone. I would just like, Temi, if you can show the slide on the feedback survey, because we've had a limited discussion here, but I've seen the chat has been very active, but we would like to hear from you further. So we have a survey where you can provide feedback about any of these working groups. As I mentioned, we'll be sharing the recording presentation and our contact information. And we're really looking forward to further engaging with you. Temi, do you manage to get that slide up?
I shared it on the chat. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay, so thank you everyone for your active participation, and we're really looking forward to this new chapter in the task force on monitoring together. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
See you
Bye-bye.
soon. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.